A silent city of stone stands with impossible precision, yet its builders left no story of war. This is the profound mystery of an advanced ancient civilization that vanished without a trace of conflict, a puzzle that rewrites everything we think we know about how societies end. You will gain a completely new perspective on human history, one where collapse is not a tale of conquest but of silent forces and forgotten choices. We will uncover how a people who mastered the stars and moved mountains could simply fade away, leaving behind only questions in their perfectly cut stone. What does it say about our own world that the most enduring legacy of the past might be one of peace, not battle? The sheer weight of the stone is the first thing you feel, a physical presence that seems to defy the centuries. But it is the silence that follows which is truly arresting. These are not crude monuments of a primitive age, but artifacts of a profound and deliberate intelligence. At places like Puma Punku in Bolivia or Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we find a puzzle written in granite and limestone. Blocks weighing many tons are not merely stacked, they are interlocked with a geometric artistry so precise that a razor blade cannot slide between them. There are no mortar joints, no clumsy gaps, just an intimate, seamless embrace of stone against stone. This is polygonal masonry, a technique where each uniquely shaped block fits perfectly with its neighbors, creating a structure that moves as one living entity during earthquakes. Modern engineers will tell you this is a feat of seismic resilience we still study today. Yet, at many of these sites, researchers find no evidence of the quarries that should be nearby, no piles of discarded tools, no trial and error mistakes. The stones appear to have been shaped, transported, and placed by a process we have not yet rediscovered. The surfaces are often flawlessly smooth, with drill holes of consistent diameter, and cut so straight they suggest a knowledge beyond simple copper chisels. This was a civilization that understood the hidden language of the earth itself, marrying advanced geometry with a celestial awareness. Their buildings align with solstices and star patterns, embedding astronomical maps into the very foundations. Some chambers are designed with acoustic properties that alter sound in mysterious ways, perhaps for ritual or a technology of resonance we can barely grasp. Figures like researcher Graham Hancock see this as the fingerprint of a sophisticated culture existing long before our conventional timelines, a culture perhaps fragmented by a great cataclysm. Mainstream archaeology, while acknowledging the astounding workmanship, often debates the exact dating and whether these were temples, observatories, or something else entirely. But the conclusion is inescapable when you stand before the work. A people who could command stone with such reverence and precision were not focused on building walls for war. They were building a permanent conversation with the universe, investing their greatest efforts into a dialogue with eternity. Their priority was not defense but meaning. And that choice alone forces us to ask, what kind of society makes such a decision? But the architecture tells only half the story. Walk through the silent plazas and into what remains of their sacred spaces, and you will search in vain for the imagery that defines so many other ancient cultures. There are no grand reliefs of kings trampling enemies, no arsenals of spears and shields, no caches of arrowheads meant for human conflict. The walls, where they are adorned at all, speak a different language entirely. They show spirals that mirror celestial movements, intricate patterns reflecting the natural world, and stylized figures that seem to be in a state of reverence or communal ritual. This is a visual record obsessed with harmony, with the cycles of the stars and the earth, not with the glory of conquest. At the vast site of Caral in Peru, one of the oldest cities in the Americas, archaeologists found musical instruments made of bone and condor feathers, not weapons. The city's layout, with its sunken circular courts and platform mounds, suggests gatherings for ceremony, trade, and shared knowledge, designed to draw people in, not to keep them out. There are no defensive walls, no narrow gates for choke points, no elevated citadels for a ruling warrior class. The very design implies a society that felt secure enough to build openly, to expose its heart to the surrounding valley. This creates a profound contrast. Look at the stele of the Assyrians, which graphically celebrate the subjugation of cities, or the columns of Rome, carved with the spoils of war. For these cultures, military power was the foundation of the state, the engine of expansion, and the central theme of their art. But for our vanished civilization, the highest artistic expression seems to have been a meditation on humanity's place within a vast, ordered cosmos. Scholars are left grappling with the implications. Was this a culture so unified in its beliefs and so proficient in its social organization that internal strife was minimal? Were they geographically blessed, isolated in a fertile valley or on a plateau that saw no aggressive neighbors for centuries? Or does their material culture point to something even more radical, a societal choice that viewed collective well-being and astronomical alignment as more vital pursuits than martial dominance? The absence of the warrior in a world where the warrior was nearly everywhere else is not just a quiet gap in the archaeological record, it is a roaring statement. It challenges the deep-seated assumption that hierarchy, conflict, and fortification are inevitable stages in a civilization's growth. It whispers the possibility that another path was once walked, a path where the greatest investment was not in instruments of control, but in tools of understanding. If they did not build their identity around the fear of others, what then were they truly afraid of? Or perhaps what did they value so much more? The stars were their true architects. While we find no grand arsenals in the ruins, we find something far more telling, etched into stone and aligned with the horizon, a celestial blueprint. This civilization possessed an astronomical understanding so sophisticated it humbles our modern assumptions about the ancient world. Their temples were not just places of gathering, they were precise observatories, their doorways and corridors framing the sunrise on the solstice, their walls pointing to the helical rising of key stars. At sites like the Osirian in Egypt or the Sun Temple of Machu Picchu, the alignment is not approximate, it is exact, requiring generations of patient observation and record-keeping. They track the slow 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis, a cycle known as precession, and seemingly built this knowledge into their myths and monuments. Researcher Robert Bovell famously proposed that the layout of the Giza pyramids mirrors the belt stars of the constellation Orion as they appeared in the sky over 10,000 years ago, suggesting a sacred geography mapped from the heavens to the earth. This was a culture that saw time not in years or decades, but in cosmic cycles stretching across millennia. Their mathematics were the silent partner to this celestial mastery. Look at the proportions of their structures, and you find the fingerprints of advanced geometry. The golden ratio, a mathematical constant found throughout nature, appears in the dimensions of their chambers and facades. There is evidence of a working understanding of pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, encoded in the relationships between a site's circular and linear features. This is not guesswork, it implies a formalized system of knowledge, a shared language of number and shape that allowed them to execute plans with breathtaking consistency across vast distances and generations. They were not merely stacking rocks, they were solving complex engineering problems with an elegance that still resonates. How did this abstract scientific prowess integrate with their seemingly peaceful society? For them, astronomy and mathematics were likely not separate disciplines, but the sacred syntax of a unified worldview. The orderly motion of the planets proved a universe governed by harmony, not chaos. To build in alignment with these cycles was to participate in that cosmic order, to ground their community within the eternal rhythm of creation itself. The stars were their library, their law, and their guide. This raises a haunting possibility. If their entire society was oriented around reading and responding to celestial patterns, what happened when the sky itself seemed to change? Could a shift in the heavens, perhaps a comet, a prolonged climatic shift triggered by a solar minimum, or a series of devastating natural events, have been interpreted not as a random disaster, but as a fundamental rupture in the cosmic order they revered? Their greatest strength, this profound connection to the cosmos, may have also been their most profound vulnerability, framing a catastrophe not as a challenge to overcome, but as a sign that their time was complete. A single, silent question echoes across continents, from the windswept plains of Turkey to the high deserts of Peru, from the remote island of Malta to the mysterious plateau of Giza. The stones speak a similar, baffling language. They are separated by vast oceans and mountain ranges, by cultures and climates we believed were isolated for millennia. Yet, the architectural fingerprints left behind bear an uncanny resemblance that defies simple coincidence. This is the fourth and perhaps most expansive mystery, the global distribution of similar megalithic sites. It is as if a forgotten blueprint was shared across the ancient world, a set of sacred instructions for how to build in conversation with the cosmos. Consider the evidence laid out before us. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid showcases breathtakingly precise stonework and celestial alignment. Across the Atlantic, at Teotihuacan in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun is laid out on a grid that mirrors the solar system's proportions, with its Avenue of the Dead aligned to the Pleiades star cluster. On the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta, the temples of Haga Kim and Mnajdra are constructed from massive limestone slabs and are exquisitely oriented to the solstice sunrises and equinoxes. Thousands of miles away, on the lonely expanse of Easter Island, the enigmatic Moai statues with their distinctive features and top-knots stand guard, their backs to the sea in a posture of solemn watchfulness. Even in distant Cambodia, the temple complex of Angkor Wat is arranged to mirror the constellation Draco. The parallels are not just in astronomical intent, but in technique, the use of polygonal masonry, of interlocking blocks without mortar, of perfectly drilled holes and surfaces smoothed to a glass-like finish. Mainstream archaeology has a long-standing answer for this phenomenon, a principle known as independent invention or psychic unity. The idea is that humans, facing similar challenges and inspired by similar awe of the heavens, naturally arrived at similar solutions. Building with large stones is a logical choice for permanence, and aligning structures with the sun or stars is a universal way to mark time and seasons. It is a compelling argument for parallel cultural evolution. Yet, for researchers like Graham Hancock or the late John Anthony West, the similarities run too deep, too specific to be mere coincidence. They point to the precise mathematical constants encoded in these structures, the shared knowledge of precession, and the advanced engineering that seems to appear fully formed without evidence of gradual development. Their controversial theory proposes a lost maritime civilization, perhaps thriving during the last ice age when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. This advanced precursor culture, possessing sophisticated nautical technology and a unified spiritual scientific worldview, could have traveled the globe, seeding knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, and monumental construction among emerging human societies. When the ice caps melted rapidly around 12,000 years ago, this coastal civilization would have been swallowed by the rising seas, its central hubs lost beneath the waves, leaving only the inland or high-altitude outposts we find today. The argument against this is formidable. There is no conclusive archaeological evidence, no shipwrecks or artifacts, that definitively proves such a global network existed in that deep antiquity. The genetic and linguistic records of ancient peoples show complex but largely independent patterns of migration and development. Skeptics argue that attributing these achievements to a lost superculture can inadvertently diminish the ingenuity of the diverse societies that actually built these sites. Yet the haunting questions remain. Why do so many ancient cultures speak of wise teachers arriving from across the sea after a great flood? Why do their creation myths share such startlingly similar themes of a destroyed world and a rebirth of knowledge? Perhaps the truth lies in a middle ground, less dramatic than a single lost continent but more connected than we once thought. Could there have been periods of long-distance contact that our current historical models are missing? A sustained, if sporadic, exchange of ideas across oceans via currents and ancient trade routes we have yet to fully map. The very possibility reshapes our understanding of the ancient world. It suggests a narrative not of isolated tribes slowly climbing a ladder of progress, but of a more collaborative, inquisitive human family. A world where knowledge of stone and star was considered a legacy to be shared, not a secret to be hoarded. If these distant stones are connected by more than just our curiosity, what they collectively whisper is a story of a planet where curiosity itself was the most powerful current, carrying ideas to the very ends of the earth long before we believed it was possible. And that story inevitably leads us to the most pressing question of all. If they were so connected, so advanced, and so peaceful, what force could possibly have made them all, from every corner of the globe, fall silent at once? The ground itself holds a memory of fire and ice. While we search for human conflict in the silent ruins, another culprit emerges from the very strata of the planet, one of unimaginable scale and indifference. The fifth possibility is not a story of enemies at the gate, but of the sky falling. It is the theory of a cataclysmic natural disaster acting as the great eraser, a single event so profound it could dismantle an advanced society without leaving a single arrowhead behind. Imagine not an invasion but an impact. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth was emerging from the last ice age. Then, suddenly, the climate reversed. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere plummeted back to near glacial conditions for over 1,000 years, an event geologists call the Younger Dryas period. What could cause such a violent about-face? A controversial but compelling idea known as the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests the trigger came from the heavens. The theory proposes that a fragmented comet or asteroid struck the Earth's atmosphere, exploding in a series of airbursts over continents like North America and possibly Europe. The immediate effects would have been apocalyptic. Thermal pulses would have ignited continent-spanning wildfires, scorching the landscape. The shockwaves would have leveled forests and anything in their path. Later, as the ice sheets were destabilized by the heat, colossal floods would have scoured the land, and a veil of dust and soot thrown into the atmosphere would have blocked the sun, plunging the world into a prolonged winter. The evidence for this is etched in the planet's diary. In sediment layers dating precisely to that time, scientists have found anomalous, microscopic diamonds called nanodiamonds, which form under extreme pressure and heat, like that of an extraterrestrial impact. They have also discovered spikes of platinum, an element rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids and comets, in ice cores from Greenland. There are layers of carbon-rich soot and melted glass, all pointing to a moment of global trauma. For a civilization, especially one perhaps concentrated along coastlines as sea levels were rising, such an event would be an existential end. Cities could have been obliterated in an instant by fireballs or tsunamis, then buried under hundreds of feet of silt or swallowed by the rapidly rising post-glacial seas. This scenario provides a starkly elegant answer to our central mystery. A society wiped out in a geological heartbeat leaves no record of its final war because there was no final war. There was only a morning that turned to fire and then to ice, their entire martial history, if it even existed, would be erased in the same layer of ash that preserved the nanodiamonds. Their greatest monuments, built to last for eternity, might now lie under the ocean floor or beneath desert sands, intact but inaccessible. This theory reframes their disappearance from a failure of society to a tragedy of cosmic circumstance. It speaks to a profound fragility, reminding us that for all our intelligence and architecture, we remain subjects to the immense forces of our planet and the solar system. It suggests their legacy is not one of defeat, but of a sudden, silent departure, their story interrupted not by human hands, but by the indifferent mechanics of the universe. If this is true, then the quiet we sense in their ruins is not the quiet of peace, but the quiet that follows a single, deafening note. And it forces us to wonder, if their world ended with a cataclysm from above, could the very event that erased them also be the reason we find their fingerprints scattered so confusingly across the globe? Yet another possibility is far quieter, a fading not with a bang but a whisper. The sixth theory proposes a gradual environmental decline and societal adaptation, a slow-motion crisis that unfolded over generations. Imagine a civilization not shattered by a sudden blow, but gently, inexorably, nudged from its home by the changing Earth itself. Centuries of subtle climate shift, the creeping depletion of once fertile soil, or the slow, relentless drop of a vital water table could have transformed a heartland into a hardship. This is a story of dissolution, not destruction, where the most rational choice was not to fight for a dying city, but to simply walk away from it. Archaeologists search for this story not in weapon caches, but in the very dirt. They analyze ancient pollen records preserved in lakebed sediments, which act as a botanical diary of the past. A dramatic shift from tree and crop pollen to hardy desert scrub pollen paints a clear picture of a landscape turning arid. Geological cores reveal layers of dust or salt, hinting at prolonged droughts or rising salinity in the soil from centuries of irrigation. These are the fingerprints of a slow environmental squeeze, a pressure that mounted year after year, season after season, until the cost of staying outweighed the profound attachment to place. In this scenario, the end was likely a managed decline, the society possessing the very foresight that built their celestial monuments would have seen the signs. Rather than wait for a final, desperate crisis, they may have orchestrated a deliberate diaspora. Knowledge was not lost in a library fire, but carried in the songs and stories of migrating families. Their advanced understanding of astronomy, agriculture, and engineering became a living heirloom, dispersed along new trails and river valleys. This theory offers a profoundly different model of collapse, one without conquest or catastrophe. It suggests a civilization that prioritized its people's survival and the preservation of its core ideals over the permanence of its stone capitals. They chose sustainability and graceful dispersal over a feudal last stand. Their grand centers were not sacked but respectfully abandoned, left to the wind and sun as the population gradually melted into the wider landscape. This dispersal would have seeded later cultures, their knowledge and bloodlines weaving subtly into the genetic and cultural tapestry of humanity. Perhaps the mysterious similarities we see in distant megalithic sites are not the work of a single lost civilization, but the scattered legacy of its children, carrying fragmented pieces of the old wisdom into new lands and new eras. Their greatest achievement, then, was not a pyramid that defied time, but a societal choice to adapt and endure, even if it meant their name was forgotten. They traded immortality in stone for continuity in the human story itself. Perhaps the most profound mystery is not where they went, but what they became. A seventh theory ventures into the realm of deep philosophy and esoteric tradition, proposing a possibility that challenges our very definition of civilization's end. What if their disappearance was not a failure but a conscious choice? What if this society, having mastered the external world of stone and star, turned its ultimate attention inward, achieving a collective awakening that made their grand cities simply obsolete? Across the world, in the oldest stories we possess, there echoes the memory of a golden age. The Greeks spoke of the Hyperboreans, a blessed people living beyond the north wind in perpetual peace and harmony. Hindu scriptures describe the Satya Yuga, an epoch of truth and righteousness when humanity lived in communion with divine law. Indigenous traditions from the Americas to the Pacific recall a time when people understood the language of animals and plants, living in balance without conflict or want. These are not mere fairy tales. They are the persistent, haunting memory of a state of being that feels lost. Could these myths be the fragmented echo of a real society that solved the fundamental riddles of human existence? Imagine a culture that, through profound spiritual insight or social innovation, moved beyond scarcity. They may have developed agricultural or energy systems so efficient that the struggle for resources, a primary driver of conflict throughout history, simply ceased to be. Imagine a social structure that dissolved rigid hierarchies and ego-driven competition, fostering a deep sense of shared identity and purpose. In such a world, the very need for a centralized, monumental state might have withered away. The stone temples, once vital centers of communal ritual and celestial observation, may have served their purpose as catalysts for this transformation. Once the knowledge was fully integrated into the culture's heart, once the connection to the cosmos was felt rather than merely observed from a designated building, the structures themselves could be left behind, like a ladder no longer needed after reaching the top. This theory of voluntary dissolution or ascension presents a radical vision. It suggests a civilization that reached a peak of material and intellectual achievement, only to recognize that the next step was not to build higher but to go deeper. The population did not perish in war or disaster. Instead, they may have chosen to disperse into smaller, nomadic, or intentionally simple communities, carrying their enlightened worldview as a living practice rather than a carved edifice. Some esoteric traditions even speak of a shift to a subtler, more spiritual plane of existence, a concept that, while beyond scientific measurement, speaks to the human intuition that consciousness itself may be the final frontier. While this idea lacks the direct archaeological proof of an impact layer or a drought-stricken pollen record, its evidence is cultural and psychological. It is found in the universal longing for a lost paradise, a yearning so deep it transcends geography and epoch. It explains the absence of conflict in the ruins perfectly, for there was no battle to flee. It explains the magnificent, abandoned stonework, for it was a testament completed, not a fortress abandoned. To consider this possibility is to redefine collapse entirely. It invites us to see not an ending, but a metamorphosis. The caterpillar does not die when it becomes the butterfly. It undergoes a radical transformation into a new state of being. Perhaps this vanished civilization achieved a similar societal metamorphosis, leaving behind the stone chrysalis of their physical achievements as they moved into a new chapter of their collective story. This idea asks the most challenging question of all, not about them, but about us. If a society can evolve beyond its own monuments, what does that suggest about the ultimate purpose of our own frantic building? Are we constructing towers to reach the heavens, or are we, perhaps, forgetting that the heavens might be found within? Buried in the dust of time are objects that do not fit the story we tell ourselves. These are the out-of-place artifacts, silent witnesses that seem to whisper of forgotten chapters in human ingenuity. The most famous is perhaps the Antikythera mechanism, recovered from an ancient Greek shipwreck. It is not a simple statue or pot, but a complex bronze clockwork device of interlocking gears, a miniature orrery used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. For over a century after its discovery, Historians could not fathom its purpose because nothing of such mechanical sophistication was believed to exist for another 1,000 years. It stands as a physical proof that our ancestors were capable of conceptual and technical leaps we never credited them with. Then there are the Baghdad batteries, simple clay jars containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod, which some experiments suggest could generate a small electrical charge. Were they used for electroplating gold onto silver, or were they merely storage vessels for sacred scrolls? The debate rages, but their very existence prompts a startling question. What if the ancients were tinkering with forces we think of as modern? Even more controversial are items like the crystal skulls, often attributed to ancient Mesoamerican cultures, but whose origins are shrouded in modern forgery and sensationalism. These serve as a crucial lesson, separating genuine archaeological puzzles from likely hoaxes that muddy the waters. The legitimate enigmas, however, force a profound reconsideration. We look at the granite boxes in the Serapeum of Saqqara, Egypt, with their interior surfaces polished to a mirror finish and corners precise to within fractions of a millimeter, and we struggle to replicate such work even with diamond-tipped tools today. What process, what lost technique achieved this? The mainstream view is one of incredible, patient skill with known materials like copper saws and abrasive sand. Yet alternative researchers point to the absence of tool marks and the sheer scale of production, wondering if a form of lost technology, perhaps even a different understanding of material science or vibration, was employed. This leads us to the core of the technological amnesia. How does a society forget how it built its own world? Knowledge is not a permanent library, it is a living tradition. If the master stoneworkers, the astronomer priests, and the engineers failed to pass on their deepest secrets, whether through a sudden catastrophe that took the experts, a societal shift that devalued the old ways, or a deliberate move to conceal power, that knowledge can vanish in a generation. The blueprints for the Antikythera mechanism were likely written on papyrus that crumbled to dust. The specific chance, the exact mixture for a softening agent, the nuanced understanding of a forgotten energy source, these could be lost forever. Our own civilization is not immune. We rely on digital storage that can be corrupted, on specialized experts whose understanding dies with them. The story of these artifacts is a humbling reminder that progress is not a straight, inevitable line upward. It is a fragile flame capable of being dimmed or even extinguished, leaving behind only beautiful, baffling relics for a future age to puzzle over. What does it say that our most enduring connection to these people is through the objects they left behind, objects we still cannot fully explain? The stories our ancestors told around ancient fires may hold the oldest clues of all. From the arid plains of Mesopotamia to the dense rainforests of the Amazon, from the icy north to the sun-baked deserts of Australia, a single narrative echoes with startling consistency the story of a great flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian hero Utnapishtim is warned by a god to build a vast boat to save his family and the seed of all living things. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Maya, the gods send a deluge of resinous rain to wipe away a failed wooden race of humanity. Aboriginal Australian traditions speak of a time when the sea rose to cover the coastal plains, forcing tribes to flee inland to higher ground. Over 500 distinct cultures across every inhabited continent preserve a version of this tale. This is not a coincidence of isolated imagination, it is a chorus of memory. While scholars like David Lewis Williams might interpret these as profound psychological archetypes, stories born from the universal human experience of birth and the subconscious, another interpretation carries a more literal weight. The details are too specific and too aligned to dismiss entirely. Repeatedly, the myths speak of divine warnings of a small group forewarned to build a vessel. They describe not just rain, but a catastrophic rising of waters that drowns mountains and reshapes coastlines. Most tellingly, they almost universally reference a lost world that came before, an age of greater knowledge of giants or sages that was washed away. Researcher Bruce Mass has even attempted to correlate these global flood myths with a specific astronomical event, like a comet impact, suggesting the stories are eyewitness accounts passed down for millennia. When we place these narratives beside the silent, unfortified ruins and the evidence of a possible cosmic impact around 12,000 years ago, a powerful pattern emerges. In the absence of any global myth about a great ancient war that wiped out an advanced civilization, we have an overwhelming abundance of stories about a great ancient water. This points decisively away from human conflict as the unifying end. Instead, it suggests a shared, searing trauma imprinted on the collective psyche of humanity's survivors, a generation who lived through a planet-altering event and made a sacred vow to never let the story be forgotten. The flood myth, then, may be the most enduring artifact this vanished culture left behind, not carved in stone, but etched into the very fabric of our shared stories. It is the cultural fossil of a real catastrophe, a warning and a memory whispered from parent to child across hundreds of generations, long after the names of the builders and the locations of their cities had faded into legend. The ocean floor holds a map we are only beginning to read, scattered across the continental shelves in the shallow seas that once were dry land. Sonar and underwater cameras have revealed shapes that defy simple geology. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, a massive stepped structure rises from the seabed, its flat terraces and sharp, 90-degree angles looking unnervingly like a sunken pyramid or plaza. In the Gulf of Cambay off India, side-scan sonar has outlined what appear to be the grid-like foundations of an enormous city, now known as Dwarka, the legendary city of the Hindu god Krishna. Even off the coast of Cuba, at depths of over 2,000 feet, explorers have reported symmetrical stone formations that resemble urban architecture. These are the submerged cities, the 10th and perhaps most tangible clue in our search. The central question is stark: are we looking at the whims of natural erosion or the drowned footprints of a lost world? Geologists point to the powerful forces of tidal currents and seismic activity, which can fracture sandstone into remarkably regular blocks. They argue that the Yonaguni Formation, for instance, could be an extraordinary but entirely natural bedrock feature. Yet, other researchers counter with the presence of what look like carved channels, circular depressions that could be post holes, and even what seems to be a crude human face etched into the stone. At Dwarka, dredging has brought up artifacts, including pottery and construction materials, that date to a time when that area was above water. The debate is a perfect microcosm of the larger mystery, a tug of war between the known processes of nature and the haunting possibility of human hands. But the mechanism for their submergence is not debated at all. Science is unequivocal. When the last ice age ended, the ice sheets that covered much of North America and Europe melted, pouring colossal volumes of water back into the oceans. From around 12,000 to 6,000 years ago, global sea levels rose by nearly 400 feet, at a rate sometimes as fast as several feet per generation. This was not a single catastrophic flood, but a slow, relentless creep. Coastlines retreated for miles, swallowing vast stretches of fertile coastal plains, river deltas, and any human settlements built there. This rising seas hypothesis provides an elegant and peaceful explanation for a civilization's disappearance. There was no invasion, no final battle. Instead, there was a gradual, generational retreat. Communities living in sophisticated coastal cities would have watched the waters advance year after year. They would have maintained their harbors, then raised their seawalls, and finally, made the solemn decision to gather their sacred knowledge, their tools, and their families, and move inland to higher ground. Over centuries, the very heart of their culture, their most populous and advanced centers, slipped beneath the waves. This is why we find no evidence of a violent end at inland sites, only outposts and perhaps later colonies. The smoking gun of their achievement is not buried in ash, but preserved in a silent, cold, and dark aquatic museum, safe from the erosion of wind and the disturbance of later builders. The search for these sunken centers is one of modern archaeology's great frontiers, a high-tech hunt using submersibles and multi-beam sonar. Each potential site is a time capsule, potentially holding intact buildings, artifacts, and even organic remains in the low-oxygen environment of the seabed. Finding one would be more than a discovery. It would be a homecoming, a chance to finally read the opening chapters of a story we have only guessed at from its scattered footnotes. If their world now lies under the sea, what does that tell us about our own coastal cities, facing a future of rising waters once again? Their silent stones suggest a society unlike any we have ever known. To build without fortification is one thing, but to live without the symbols of power is another entirely. In the heart of their cities, we search for the palaces and the grand tombs, the towering monuments to individual kings that define ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, or China. We find none. There are no vast treasuries hoarding gold and weapons, no royal inscriptions listing conquests and subjugated peoples. The architecture that remains speaks of shared spaces, great plazas, circular courts, and temples open to the sky, designed for gathering, not for exclusion. This profound absence is itself a loud declaration. It forces us to reconstruct a social model built not on command and control, but on something far more subtle and perhaps more resilient. Governance in such a place likely flowed from a different source. Perhaps it was vested in a class of priestly astronomers, individuals revered not for their capacity for violence, but for their ability to read the language of the cosmos. Their authority would have been spiritual and intellectual, guiding the community through celestial cycles, agricultural calendars, and the sacred rituals that bound society to the universe. Alternatively, power may have been distributed through councils of elders, a system where wisdom earned through experience and a deep knowledge of tradition shaped collective decisions. Or, most radically, it might have operated on a model of communal consensus, where major undertakings, from aligning a temple to organizing labor, arose from shared purpose and mutual agreement. We see echoes of this in other ancient, peaceful complexes. The great cities of the Indus Valley civilization, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, flourished for centuries with remarkably standardized brickwork, sophisticated drainage, and granaries, yet they show scant evidence of royal iconography or dedicated military structures. Their seals depict animals and perhaps deities, but no glorified warriors. Similarly, the large Neolithic settlement at Çatalhöyük in Turkey presents a maze of homes built side by side, with entrances through the roof, suggesting a communal focus and a notable lack of public buildings for a ruling elite. Could our vanished civilization have been a theocracy of star priests, where law was written in the movements of the planets? Or perhaps a society where maternal lineages and principles of nurturing held greater sway in social organization? Some researchers even ponder whether it represented an early, successful experiment in what we might now call anarcho-syndicalism, a complex society functioning through voluntary cooperation and shared expertise without a centralized state. The implication of any of these models is revolutionary. It directly challenges the long-held assumption that social complexity, monumental achievement, and cultural sophistication require rigid hierarchy, concentrated wealth, and the threat of organized violence. Their accomplishments in stone and astronomy prove that humanity can coordinate on a grand scale, can push the boundaries of knowledge and engineering without the whip of a pharaoh or the spear of a king. Their social contract, whatever its exact form, was evidently compelling enough to mobilize generations toward a common, celestial vision. Understanding this lost blueprint is not merely an academic exercise. It offers a powerful alternative narrative for human potential, one where collective endeavor is fueled by shared meaning rather than fear of punishment or promise of plunder. In a modern world grappling with profound inequality, environmental crisis, and the constant specter of conflict, the legacy of this peaceful civilization poses a quiet, urgent question. If they could build for eternity without building walls of oppression, what does that say about the foundations of our own global society? Their greatest monument may ultimately be the idea they left behind, the proof that another way of living together was not just imagined but once, long ago, actually built. The stones they left behind are a testament to their minds, but the true foundation of their society was laid in the soil. A civilization capable of such monumental focus must have solved the most basic human equation: how to feed a large, non-farming population. Yet at many of these mysterious sites, archaeologists find a conspicuous absence: the massive, centralized grain storage facilities that are the hallmark of other ancient empires. In Egypt, the pharaoh's power was literally measured in granaries. In Rome, the Annona system fed the city and controlled the populace. But here, there are no vast silos, no great warehouses for taxing and redistributing surplus. This missing architecture points to an economic model built on a radically different principle: not the management of scarcity, but the cultivation of sustainable abundance. Their agricultural system may have been an advanced agroecology, a seamless partnership with nature rather than a battle against it. Imagine not endless fields of a single, vulnerable crop, but vibrant food forests and perennial polycultures. They might have mastered companion planting on a grand landscape scale, like the legendary Three Sisters method of the Americas, where corn, beans, and squash grow together in a symbiotic relationship that nourishes the soil and provides complete nutrition. Perhaps they integrated sophisticated aquaculture, creating Chinampa-style raised gardens in wetlands or managing freshwater systems teeming with fish and edible plants, a closed loop of fertility. Water, the lifeblood of any civilization, would have been managed with an artistry matching their stonework. They could have employed techniques like those of the Nabateans, who carved intricate networks of channels and cisterns into desert rock to capture every precious drop of rainfall, turning barren land into pockets of lush productivity. This was not agriculture as brute force, but as applied ecology, a deep understanding of local microclimates, soil microbiology, and plant relationships that yielded a diverse and resilient bounty. Such a system would have profound social consequences. An economy based on diverse, perennial food sources is harder to centrally control and tax than one based on a single annual grain harvest. Wealth and power cannot as easily concentrate in the hands of those who control the granary keys. Food security becomes a distributed, community-embedded reality, reducing the primary driver of social inequality and conflict. The builders of the megaliths were not hungry laborers driven by a whip, but perhaps well-nourished participants in a shared sacred project, sustained by a landscape that worked with them. This raises a pivotal question about their end. If their society was woven so intricately into a specific ecological balance, it would have been exquisitely vulnerable to long-term climate shifts. A gradual change in rainfall patterns, a series of unusually harsh seasons, or a slow degradation of their carefully managed soils could have unraveled the entire system. Their disappearance, then, might not stem from invasion or internal revolt, but from the silent failure of this ancient covenant with the land. The stones remained, but the living system that made them possible faded away, leaving behind a monument not to a king, but to a forgotten way of feeding a civilization in peace. This single idea unravels the entire tapestry of our history books. the accepted narrative is a comforting ascent, a story of humanity slowly climbing from simple stone tools to the smartphone, each generation building on the last in a steady march forward. But what if that march has been interrupted not just once but many times? What if history is not a line but a spiral, or even a series of disconnected peaks rising from a sea of forgotten time? The existence of a sophisticated, peaceful civilization in deep prehistory presents exactly this challenge. It suggests that advanced social organization, astronomical knowledge, and monumental engineering are not the exclusive end products of a long, linear evolution. They could be phenomena that emerge under the right conditions, flourish, and then, for reasons we are only beginning to grasp, vanish, leaving the survivors to start again from a much simpler baseline. This is the concept of cyclical time, of catastrophic resets, and it stands in direct opposition to the linear progress model that has dominated Western thought since the Enlightenment. The idea that a high culture could predate the Sumerians and Egyptians by thousands of years, and that its knowledge might have seeded later societies, is often labeled hyperdiffusionism. In its most extreme form, it suggests all civilization sprang from a single source, a notion mainstream archaeology rightly critiques for often diminishing the incredible ingenuity of independent cultures worldwide. Yet, the backlash can be so strong that it sometimes marginalizes any evidence of unexpected antiquity or surprising technological capability, branding it as pseudoscience before it is fully examined. This resistance is not merely academic, it is deeply philosophical. To accept that a society could reach a peak and then be utterly forgotten shakes our faith in the permanence of achievement. It forces us to confront the fragility of everything we build. Scholars like Immanuel Velikovsky, though his specific theories about planetary collisions were widely rejected by astronomers, played a pivotal role in this intellectual struggle. His work in the mid-20th century, detailed in books like Worlds in Collision, forced historians and scientists to publicly debate the role of sudden, earth-changing catastrophes in shaping human destiny. He challenged the dogma of uniformitarianism, the idea that geological and historical change is always slow and gradual. While his methods were controversial, the conversation he ignited helped pave the way for more credible investigations into events like the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. The lesson here is not about accepting every fringe theory, but about maintaining intellectual humility. Our current technological age, with its global networks and artificial intelligence, feels like an unprecedented pinnacle. We see ourselves at the summit of human history, but if the cyclical view holds any truth, we may not be at the summit at all. We may simply be on another peak, one of many in a long mountain range whose earliest and highest summits are now shrouded in mist. The silent builders of the megaliths, whoever they were, likely felt just as advanced, just as permanent. Their story, whispered by stone and star myth, becomes a crucial lesson in resilience. It asks us what truly defines progress. Is it merely the sophistication of our tools, or is it the wisdom with which we use them? Is it the height of our towers, or the depth of our connection to each other and the planet that sustains us? Their legacy suggests that a civilization divorced from ecological harmony and spiritual meaning, no matter how technically brilliant, may carry the seeds of its own reset within it. Their vanishing act is not a tale of failure, but a timeless question posed to us across the millennia. Deep within their stone temples, the air itself seems to hold a different kind of silence. It is not merely an absence of sound, but a resonant stillness, a space designed to alter the very nature of perception. Some of these chambers possess extraordinary acoustic properties, where a single chant or drumbeat can be transformed into a cascade of echoes that seem to originate from within the listener's own mind. Others are built in profound darkness, cut off from the outside world, creating conditions ripe for sensory deprivation. This architectural focus points toward a startling possibility that this civilization may have intentionally cultivated altered states of consciousness as a central pillar of their culture. For them, non-ordinary perception might not have been an escape from reality, but a doorway into a deeper layer of it. Researchers across disciplines have noted how the geometric patterns found in ancient sacred art, the intricate spirals and fractal lattices carved into stone, bear a striking resemblance to the visions reported in profound meditative, trance, or entheogenic experiences. Psychiatrist Rick Strassman's research into the powerful psychoactive compound DMT documented volunteers consistently describing encounters with intricate, self-transforming geometric landscapes and intelligent, communicative entities, often referred to in modern terms as machine elves or teachers. These visionary experiences, shared across time and culture when certain neurological states are accessed, suggest a common human perceptual territory. If the builders of the megaliths were using ritual practices, perhaps involving specific sound frequencies, rhythmic drumming, fasting, or carefully prepared psychoactive plants, to collectively enter this territory, it would fundamentally reshape our understanding of their achievements. Their astronomy may not have been born from cold, detached observation alone, but from a felt, visionary communion with the night sky. Their flawless stonework might have emerged from a state of heightened awareness where the boundaries between the artisan, the tool, and the stone dissolved into a unified flow. Healing, decision-making, and social bonding could have been facilitated in these shared visionary states, creating a profound sense of unity and purpose that made internal conflict unthinkable. This presents a holistic model of development where what we now separate into science and spirituality were a single, integrated pursuit of knowledge. The peaceful nature of their society could be a direct reflection of this worldview, born from repeated, direct experience of the interconnectedness of all life. In an altered state, the illusion of separation fades, and the well-being of the community and the environment is felt as intimately as one's own. This is not merely a philosophical idea, but a perceptual reality for those who have experienced it. Our modern world, with its rampant isolation and environmental fragmentation, is only beginning to relearn this ancient wisdom through the lenses of systems theory, ecology, and the renewed scientific study of consciousness. Their greatest technology, then, may have been the human mind itself, carefully tuned by ritual and architecture to perceive harmonies we have since forgotten. Their silent stones do not mark a tomb, but a temple to a different way of knowing, one where the cosmos was not just mapped, but truly met. Our own bodies may carry the oldest memories of them, written in a code we are only now learning to read. The search for this vanished civilization has moved from stone and myth into the very blueprint of life itself, into the genetic and linguistic traces hidden within modern populations. This is a search for ghost populations, for whispers in our blood and our words. Geneticists, by analyzing the DNA of people from around the world, have begun to map not just our known ancestry, but unexpected, ancient admixture events. These are moments in deep prehistory where distinct human groups met and mingled, leaving a permanent signature. In some isolated tribes, from the rainforests of the Amazon to the islands of the South Pacific, scientists find genetic markers that do not fit the standard models of human migration. They point to the presence of an unknown, archaic group, a ghost population that contributed to the modern gene pool but left no clear archaeological record of its own. This is not about finding a pure, unbroken bloodline from a lost Atlantis. That is a fantasy. It is about identifying subtle, shared inheritances, a faint but widespread genetic whisper suggesting that a distinct and perhaps sophisticated people were once absorbed into the broader human family after a period of great upheaval. Their legacy is not a separate tribe, but a thread woven into the tapestry of us all. A similar ghost haunts our languages, Linguists like the late Merit Rulon have spent decades looking past the surface differences of tongues to propose deep language families, connections that reach back tens of thousands of years. They search for root words so ancient and fundamental that they persist across continents. Could certain words for star or water or mother, found in seemingly unrelated languages from Europe to Asia to the Americas, be lexical fossils from a lost mother tongue? Consider the Basque language of the Pyrenees, a linguistic isolate with no known relatives in Europe. Its structure is unique, a survivor from a time before the Indo-European languages swept across the continent. Or the Dravidian languages of southern India, with their own ancient literary tradition. Some researchers have even noted startling, speculative parallels between certain grammatical structures in Dravidian and some indigenous languages of the Americas. These connections, while hotly debated and far from conclusive, suggest the possibility of a vastly old linguistic stratum, a foundational layer of human communication that may have spread with early global migrations. If a sophisticated culture was fragmented by a cataclysm 12,000 years ago, its survivors would have carried their language and genes as they dispersed. Over millennia, those languages would evolve into new forms, and those genetic signatures would dilute through mixing, but echoes would remain. Finding these echoes is like trying to hear a single, ancient song played by 1,000 different orchestras, each with different instruments. The melody is changed, but a haunting refrain might still be recognized. This line of inquiry transforms the mystery from an archaeological puzzle into a personal one. It suggests that the legacy of this lost civilization is not locked away in a sunken city or a forgotten ruin. It might be carried within us in the deep structure of our speech and the silent code of our cells. Their greatest monument, therefore, would not be a temple of stone, but the enduring imprint they left on humanity itself, a shared heritage written in the very essence of who we are. A global map reveals a pattern that seems to defy chance. When you plot the world's most enigmatic ancient sites, from Stonehenge to the Great Pyramid, from Easter Island to Angkor Wat, they do not scatter randomly. Instead, they appear to align along sweeping arcs across the planet's surface, intersecting at specific nodes of power. This is the speculative realm of Earth energies and ley lines, the idea that our ancestors built their sacred monuments upon a pre-existing, invisible grid of telluric force. Proponents of this view, like researcher and author John Mitchell, argue that these alignments, often called ley lines, are not mere imagination. They point to the fact that many of these sites sit atop geological fault lines, near volcanic plugs, or above underground water aquifers, places where measurable electromagnetic activity differs from the surrounding area. At Stonehenge, for instance, studies have shown localized magnetic anomalies and unusual ground conductivity. Around the Great Pyramid, some instruments have detected faint but persistent electromagnetic fields whose source is not fully understood. Could these places have been chosen not just for their celestial vistas, but for their telluric vibrations? The theory suggests this lost civilization possessed a sophisticated geomancy, a science of aligning human structures with the subtle energies of the living Earth. Their goal might have been to harness this energy for purposes we can barely grasp, perhaps for healing, for amplifying consciousness in ritual spaces, or even as a form of resonant communication across vast distances, using the planet itself as a kind of crystalline receiver. This represents a technology of harmony, not extraction. It is a stark contrast to our modern paradigm, which rips fossil fuels from the ground and burns them. Theirs would have been a technology of attunement, drawing from renewable planetary pulses to power their society in a seamless, non-destructive symbiosis. Such a deep, felt connection to the Earth as a living entity would naturally foster a peaceful, custodial ethos. You do not wage war upon a landscape you perceive as the source of your vitality and your sacred connection to the cosmos. Mainstream science remains deeply skeptical, of course. The term ley line itself originates from early 20th century amateur archaeology, and critics rightly point out that with enough points on a map, you can always draw seemingly significant lines between them, a cognitive bias known as apophenia. They argue that ancient builders chose high ground for visibility or near water for survival, not to tap into mystical energy grids, yet the consistency is haunting. So many of these sites are found along what some call the Great Circle, a band that wraps the globe, intersecting with other major geometric patterns. Whether these lines are objectively real energetic pathways or a profound symbolic geography mapping a spiritual worldview, their potential impact is the same. They guided a civilization to build in specific harmony with the planet. If their monuments were indeed switches in a planetary circuit of meaning and energy, then their silent stones are not dead ruins. They are dormant instruments waiting for a time when we might relearn the frequency on which they once broadcast. The Indus Valley cities rise from the dust as a powerful echo of our mystery. Here, along the banks of ancient rivers in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, a civilization flourished for centuries with a signature style of quiet sophistication. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were metropolises of their time, home to tens of thousands, built on a grid of straight, wide streets with advanced municipal drainage running beneath them. They used standardized weights and measures across a vast region, implying a strong, shared system of trade and governance. Yet, like the subject of our search, they built no towering ziggurats to gods, no sprawling palaces for kings, and no grand monuments celebrating military victories. Their seals depict animals, mythical creatures, and a figure often called the priest-king, but they tell no stories of conquest. The archaeological record here is strikingly clean of the tools of large-scale conflict. While some weapons for hunting or small-scale conflict existed, there is no evidence of sacked cities, of mass graves from battle, or of the fortified walls meant to withstand a siege. This is a civilization that mastered urban living on a grand scale, yet seemed to organize itself without the classic trappings of centralized militaristic power. Their decline, too, mirrors a peaceful fade. For decades, scholars believed the Indus Valley people were overrun by invading Aryan tribes, a theory drawn from later texts. But modern archaeology finds no layer of ash, no piles of skeletons from a final stand, no sudden change in material culture that would signal a violent takeover. Instead, the evidence points to a slow, environmental unraveling. Geological studies suggest the mighty Sarasvati River, a lifeline for the civilization described in ancient texts, began to dry up as monsoon patterns shifted. Other rivers changed their courses, stranding cities inland or causing devastating floods. This was a death by 1,000 cuts, a gradual salinization of the soil, a creeping drought that made sustaining such dense urban populations impossible over generations. The people did not vanish in a day, they adapted. They likely dispersed in smaller groups, migrating east and south, carrying their culture and knowledge into the Indian subcontinent, where it would eventually blend into and influence later traditions. The story of the Indus Valley is a proven case study. It demonstrates conclusively that a complex, advanced, and largely peaceful urban society can indeed rise, thrive for centuries, and then decline without a dramatic, war-torn finale. Its end was not written in blood, but in silt and shifting rainfall. This real-world parallel lends immense credence to the possibility that our primary vanished civilization followed a similar, non-violent trajectory. It shows us that environmental adaptation is a powerful, often silent, force in history. When the land itself changes, the most rational response for a society, even a highly advanced one, may not be to fight for a dying city, but to simply walk away from it, preserving their community in a new form. The Indus Valley does not give us all the answers, but it provides a crucial frame of reference. It tells us that the quiet we sense in those other, older ruins is not a historical anomaly, but perhaps a forgotten norm. The island of Malta holds a story carved not in words, but in the very bedrock of the land. Here, a culture of temple builders created sanctuaries of staggering scale and spiritual depth, only to leave them empty for reasons we are still piecing together. Their temples, like Haga Kim and Mnajdra, are colossal puzzles of limestone. Massive slabs, some weighing over 20 tons, were shaped and erected into complexes of apses and corridors, forming what many consider the oldest free-standing stone structures on Earth, predating even the pyramids of Giza. The sophistication is breathtaking. At Haga Kim, specific stones are perforated with precisely carved holes. During the summer solstice, the rising sun streams through these apertures, projecting beams of light that illuminate specific carved altars within the dark interior. This was a celestial calendar in stone, a sacred mechanism for marking the turning of the year. Yet, for all this architectural genius, we find no trace of written language, no royal tombs filled with treasure, and most tellingly, no walls built for war. The temples are open, inviting, focused inward on ritual and community rather than outward on defense. This society expressed its worldview through art, leaving behind countless figurines of full-bodied women, often called the Fat Lady statues. These are not images of warriors or kings, but potent symbols of fertility, abundance, and the nurturing essence of life itself. Their entire material culture speaks of a deep reverence for creation, for the cycles of nature, and for a goddess-centered cosmology that valued life-giving forces above all else. They flourished for over 1,000 years, from around 3600 to 2500 before Common Era, in what appears to be a long period of stability and profound spiritual focus. Then they stopped building. The great temples fell into disuse. The culture that created them seemed to evaporate from the archaeological record. There is no layer of ash, no cache of shattered weapons, no evidence of a conquering army arriving on Malta's shores. The end was a quiet disappearance. Modern research points not to invasion, but to the slow, crushing pressure of environmental change. Pollen analysis from ancient soil layers tells a story of gradual deforestation and intensive farming over centuries. The fertile soil that sustained this dense, temple-building society began to erode and exhaust itself. Climate data suggests a shift toward drier conditions may have compounded the crisis, turning hardship into an irreversible decline. Facing depleted land and dwindling resources, the people likely faced a stark choice. They could have fractured into conflict over what remained, yet we find no evidence of that violent turn. Instead, the most plausible scenario is one of gradual dispersal. Families and groups may have simply left, taking to boats in search of new beginnings, their cultural identity slowly blending into other populations across the Mediterranean. The temples were not destroyed, they were respectfully abandoned, left as silent monuments to a covenant with the land that had ultimately been broken. Malta is a perfect, poignant microcosm of the larger global mystery. It demonstrates with archaeological clarity how an advanced, peaceful, and artistically brilliant culture can rise to great heights and then vanish, not with a bang, but with a whisper of departing footsteps. Its story provides a tangible, localized model for how a hypothetical global civilization, equally in tune with the Earth and the stars, could have met a similar fate on a planetary scale. If a single island society can fade due to ecological pressures without a trace of war, then perhaps the same silent force, magnified across continents, could explain the greatest vanishing act in human history. Their silent legacy forces a question that echoes far beyond archaeology. What if we have been measuring civilization with the wrong ruler entirely? Our modern world defines advancement in stark, tangible terms: the height of our skyscrapers, the speed of our processors, the reach of our empires, and the accumulation of material wealth. These are the metrics of a story that equates power with expansion and control. But the people who built the timeless stones left behind a different set of clues, pointing to a progress measured not in territory conquered, but in harmony achieved. Their advancement might have been calibrated in spiritual understanding, in the depth of their connection to the ecological web that sustained them, and in the profound social peace that allowed them to build without fortification. Consider the stark contrast with the empires that fill our history books. The Romans built awe-inspiring aqueducts and roads, but their society was fundamentally engineered by the legion and sustained by conquest. The Mongols created the largest contiguous land empire in history, a feat of staggering logistical power, but it was a whirlwind born from the saddle and the sword. These cultures, for all their brilliance, carried the seeds of their own vulnerability within their very model of growth, often fracturing from internal strife or falling to external rivals. Their stories follow a familiar arc: rise, conquest, golden age, overextension, and collapse. The civilization of the Silent Stones presents a radical alternative to that arc. What if their greatest achievement was not moving mountains of stone, but moving beyond the very need for conflict as an organizing principle? Their investment was in a different kind of infrastructure, the infrastructure of meaning, of collective well-being, and of cosmic alignment. They built observatories, not arsenals. They invested in communal ritual spaces, not royal palaces. This redefinition is not a romantic dismissal of technology, but a fundamental questioning of its purpose. Technology in their hands appears to have been a tool for integration, for deepening their dialogue with nature and the heavens, not for dominating or extracting from them. Their ghostly legacy now serves as a mirror held up to our own age. We possess technological wonders they could never have dreamed of, yet we face unprecedented environmental strain, social fragmentation, and the persistent shadow of geopolitical conflict. We are masters of the atom, yet often feel powerless to mend the basic fabric of our communities. This forces us to ask with uncomfortable honesty, what are we truly progressing toward? Is our path, marked by its profound disconnects, the only or the best model for a sustainable human future? The silent builders do not offer us a blueprint to copy. Their world is gone and we cannot return to it, but they do offer us a perspective, a proof of concept that another set of values can form the foundation for a complex and enduring society. They challenge us to expand our definition of what it means to be advanced. Is a civilization truly advanced if it can create a smartphone but cannot ensure the health of the soil that feeds it? Is it progressive if it can map the human genome but has not mapped a path to lasting peace? Their stones ask us to consider what we value most, and ultimately, what we are willing to lose in our relentless pursuit of a progress defined only by more, faster, and bigger. In their quiet absence, they pose the most urgent question of all. If we had to choose, would we rather be remembered for what we built or for how we lived while building it? The world's oldest stories may be telling us the same tale. From the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, from the dense Amazon to the outback of Australia, a foundational memory persists. It is not a memory of a single king or a great battle, but of a shared beginning and a great unraveling. This pattern, etched in myth and stone, points toward a startling possibility that before the age of empires and isolated tribes, humanity participated in a unified global culture. This was not a monolithic empire with one ruler, but a widespread network bound by a common core of knowledge, a primordial understanding of how to live in concert with the cosmos and the earth. The evidence for this lies in the profound similarities that transcend geography. We have already seen the global flood myths, but the parallels run deeper. Consider the symbol of the serpent or the dragon, representing wisdom, the earth's energy, or the cycle of life and death, appearing in cultures from the Naga of India to the plumed serpent Quetzalcoatl of Mesoamerica to the dragons of Chinese lore. Observe the recurring architectural blueprint, the sacred mound or pyramid representing the primordial mountain where heaven and earth meet, found in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, and Southeast Asia. Even specific astronomical knowledge, like the precession of the equinoxes, seems encoded in disparate mythologies, suggesting a common source of observation that dates back tens of thousands of years. This points to a deep prehistory where ideas, teachers, and perhaps even populations moved across continents with a freedom we find difficult to comprehend, sharing a spiritual technological package focused on harmony, celestial order, and sustainable living. The disappearance of this unifying culture, whether through a slow environmental fade or a sudden cataclysm, could then be seen as the pivotal fracture in the human story. In the absence of that central, harmonizing influence, the scattered survivors evolved in isolation. Languages diverged into thousands of tongues. Local identities hardened into tribes, then kingdoms, then nations. Knowledge fragmented, with some groups retaining the astronomical wisdom but forgetting the peaceful ethos, while others held onto communal values but lost the technical prowess. The shared project became 1,000 competing projects. The vacuum left by that lost unity was filled by the dynamics that define most of recorded history: scarcity, competition for resources, the rise of defensive and then aggressive hierarchies, and the institution of warfare as a tool of statecraft. What we call history, with its endless cycles of rise and fall, may in fact be the long, fragmented aftermath of a great forgetting. This perspective is both melancholic and profoundly hopeful. It is melancholic because it reframes our past not as a steady climb from savagery, but as a long exile from a state of deeper connection and shared purpose. Yet it is hopeful because it provides a tangible goal for our collective future, one that is not a utopian fantasy but a return to a state we have already, in some dimly remembered epoch, achieved. Our modern world, with its instant global communication, interconnected economies, and shared scientific language, is accidentally recreating the conditions for a new global culture. The challenge is whether we can consciously choose its founding principles. Will this new unity be based on the old paradigms of competition and consumption, or can we reach back into that deep memory and select a different set of blueprints? Can we build a planetary civilization that values ecological balance as much as economic growth, that sees cultural diversity not as a fault line but as a tapestry, and that redirects our immense technological power from domination to integration? The silent stones of our deepest past stand as witnesses to that first, forgotten attempt. They do not judge us, but they do remind us. The choice before us now is not whether to become one world. That process is already underway. The choice is what kind of one world we will build. Will it be a unity imposed by force and fear, or a unity rediscovered through wisdom and a shared memory of who we once were, and therefore who we might yet become again? The silence of the stones is so profound, the technology so precise, that it has inspired one of the most debated questions in all of human history. Could the knowledge that built these wonders have come from somewhere else entirely? This line of inquiry leads us to the ancient astronaut hypothesis, a theory popularized in the late 1960s by authors like Erich von Däniken. It proposes that many of humanity's sudden leaps in technology and culture were not our own inventions, but gifts from extraterrestrial visitors. Proponents of this view point to a specific set of artifacts and myths as potential evidence. They highlight the intricate Nazca lines in Peru, massive geoglyphs best viewed from the air, and ask who they were meant for. They examine ancient texts like the Sanskrit epics of India that describe flying machines called vimanas and weapons of immense power. They look at carvings and figurines from various cultures that, to some, resemble figures in modern pressure suits or helmets. The argument hinges on a core idea that our ancestors, encountering beings with advanced technology, would have interpreted them as gods and their advanced tools as divine gifts. This framework offers a seductive solution to our central mystery. It explains the sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge, the global similarities in myth and monument, and even the peaceful nature of the society, if they were under the guidance or protection of a more advanced intelligence. The disappearance in this scenario could be tied to the departure of these visitors, leaving their human students to slowly forget the advanced teachings. It is a theory born from a very human place, the struggle to reconcile the scale of the achievement with the absence of a clear, evolutionary trail leading up to it. When the gap in the historical record feels too wide, the imagination naturally seeks a bridge, even one built from the stars. This hypothesis, while captivating, operates almost entirely outside the methods of mainstream archaeology, which seeks explanations rooted in human ingenuity and gradual cultural development. For every artifact cited as proof of alien contact, conventional scholarship offers an alternative, human-centered interpretation. The Nazca lines may have been ritual pathways related to water deities walked by priests. The Vimana texts could be poetic metaphors or descriptions of siege towers. The so-called astronaut figurines often fit neatly within the stylistic and religious conventions of their own cultures. The scientific community largely rejects the ancient astronaut theory due to this lack of verifiable evidence and its tendency to diminish the vast creative capacity of ancient peoples themselves. This brings us to the crucial contrast, the lost human civilization model. This alternative, while still radical, keeps the agency firmly within humanity's own story. It suggests that a sophisticated human culture did arise in deep antiquity, perhaps after the last ice age, developing its knowledge of astronomy, geometry, and sustainable living over millennia, not in a sudden flash. Its achievements were homegrown, the product of observation, experimentation, and a cultural priority on harmony that we have since lost sight of. Its disappearance, through environmental change or catastrophe, was a human tragedy, not an interstellar departure. This model is challenging to prove, but it operates within the realm of human possibility, relying on forces like climate change, geological shifts, and cultural memory, which we know to be real. The enduring power of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, however, is not in its likely truth, but in what its popularity reveals about us. It is a symptom of the profound awe and bafflement these sites inspire. When faced with something that so thoroughly challenges our narrative of linear progress, the human mind seeks an agent, a teacher, a cause equal to the effect. The ancient astronaut theory provides a dramatic external cause. It speaks to a deep-seated feeling that we have forgotten something monumental, and that the answer must therefore be equally monumental, beyond even our planet. But perhaps the more awe-inspiring possibility is the one that requires no outside intervention. The idea that human beings, using only their intellect, patience, and a deep connection to their world, could achieve such feats and organize themselves so peacefully, may actually be the more revolutionary concept. It places the mystery and the majesty not out among the stars, but here, within the untapped potential of our own species. Whether the spark of their knowledge was entirely their own or inspired by a forgotten encounter, the civilization they built, the stones they cut, and the peaceful legacy they left behind remain a human story, one that continues to ask us what we are truly capable of. Our search has moved from dusty libraries to the silent, electronic hum of supercomputers and satellites. The hunt for this lost world is no longer confined to the trowel and brush. It is being revolutionized by technologies that see through Earth, water, and time itself. Imagine a laser rain falling on a dense, impenetrable rainforest canopy. This is LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, mounted on aircraft or drones. It fires millions of laser pulses toward the ground, and by measuring their return, it can digitally strip away the vegetation, revealing the ghostly contours of the landscape beneath. Across Central and South America, this technology has unveiled vast, hidden cities and complex road networks of the Maya and other cultures, proving that our maps of the ancient world are still mostly blank. It is only a matter of time before these eyes in the sky scan the right forgotten valley or plateau and reveal the grid of a metropolis we never knew existed. Beneath our feet, ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic pulses into the soil, painting a picture of buried walls, chambers, and voids without moving a single stone. At sites like the Scan Pyramids project in Egypt, teams use muon tomography, which relies on cosmic rays to detect density changes, revealing hidden chambers within the Great Pyramid that have been sealed for millennia. This is archaeology without intrusion, a respectful X-ray vision that asks questions of the past without disturbing its rest. The oceans, long the greatest barrier, are now becoming transparent. Side-scan sonar and multi-beam bathymetry create stunningly detailed three-dimensional maps of the seafloor, turning miles of dark water into a searchable landscape. Every unusual shape, every straight line or right angle on a continental shelf can now be flagged and investigated. This is how potential sites like the Yonaguni Formation or the structures in the Gulf of Cambay are being studied, moving them from blurry sonar images into the realm of serious geological and archaeological analysis. Even the artifacts we already have are beginning to speak new truths. Isotopic analysis can now trace a piece of pottery or a stone tool back to its exact quarry, mapping ancient trade routes with forensic certainty. Researchers can analyze microscopic plant residues or ancient DNA on a grinding stone to reconstruct entire diets and agricultural practices. And perhaps most powerfully, artificial intelligence is being trained to scour petabytes of satellite imagery, looking for patterns, geometric shapes, alignments, or soil discolorations that the human eye would miss over a lifetime of searching. This is the new frontier, a collaboration between the intuition of the historian and the indefatigable pattern recognition of machine learning, the work of researchers like the late Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist who analyzed the weathering patterns on the Great Sphinx and proposed it was much older than traditionally believed, exemplifies this shift. He brought the tools of hard science, the study of water erosion, to a monument shrouded in myth. Whether one agrees with his conclusions or not, his approach marked a turning point, insisting that these mysteries be tested with the full rigor of modern geology and climatology. This technological leap transforms the quest from a fringe pursuit into a mainstream, interdisciplinary science. It is no longer just the domain of the lone adventurer, but of teams comprising oceanographers, geophysicists, data scientists, and archaeologists. The goal is to replace speculation with data, to exchange intriguing stories for verifiable coordinates. The promise is breathtaking. We may one day have the precise location of a city swallowed by the sea, or definitive proof that a controversial underwater structure was shaped by human hands. We are no longer just wondering about a lost world. We are methodically, patiently scanning the entire planet for its signature. The silence of the past is meeting the persistent inquiry of the present, and for the first time in millennia, it might just have to answer. This story speaks to something far deeper than curiosity. It taps into a universal human longing, a psychological echo that resonates across centuries. We are drawn to the idea of a vanished, wiser people because, in many ways, it reflects our own deepest hopes and anxieties. The narrative of a peaceful, advanced civilization that simply faded away acts as a powerful mirror for our collective soul. At its heart, it is a story of a golden age, a concept found in nearly every culture's mythology, from the Garden of Eden to the Greek concept of the ages of man. This is not a random invention, it is a fundamental part of how we process time and progress. We instinctively measure our complex, often stressful present against an imagined past of purity, unity, and effortless harmony. The lost civilization becomes that idealized past, a time when humanity was supposedly more in tune with nature, the cosmos, and each other. It represents a clean slate in history, a world before the complications of modern states, before the scars of recorded warfare, before the environmental strains we see today. This nostalgia for a paradise lost provides a comforting counterpoint to our current challenges. When we look at their silent, unfortified stones, we are not just seeing ancient architecture, we are seeing a reflection of what we feel we have lost, a simplicity and purpose that seems elusive now. Furthermore, this mystery fulfills a profound human need for the unexplained. In an age of satellites and search engines, where so much of our world is mapped, measured, and demystified, the idea of a great unanswered question is incredibly compelling. It preserves a sense of wonder. The lost civilization is a puzzle that resists our technology, a secret that the Earth refuses to give up easily. It assures us that the world still holds grand mysteries, that history is not a closed book but a manuscript with missing chapters waiting to be found. This allure also functions as a blank canvas. We project onto this vanished culture our highest aspirations for human potential, imagining them as enlightened stewards of the planet, master harmonizers of science and spirit. Simultaneously, we project our deepest fears about our own trajectory. Their disappearance, whether by environmental change or cosmic accident, serves as a sobering parable for our own possible futures. It asks us quietly but insistently if our path, for all its glittering technology, might lead to a similar silent ending. Recognizing this powerful psychological draw is crucial. It helps us separate the emotional and mythic power of the story from the tangible, often more gradual evidence on the ground. It allows us to honor the profound human yearning that the myth represents, the longing for peace, wisdom, and connection, while continuing our search with clear eyes and rigorous methods. The lost civilization, whether fully real or partly imagined, endures because it tells us something essential about ourselves. It is a story we need to believe in, not necessarily as literal history, but as a reminder of what we are capable of becoming, and a warning of what we must strive to avoid. Their silent stones now speak directly to the noise of our own age. This ancient mystery transforms from a historical curiosity into a profound, urgent parable for the 21st century. If this advanced society ultimately faded due to a slow environmental unraveling or a failure to adapt its social structures, then their story is no longer just about the past. It is a flashing beacon about our collective future. The parallels are unsettling and impossible to ignore. They likely faced a changing climate, whether a gradual drying of their heartland or a sudden climatic shock. We face our own accelerating global warming, driven not by natural cycles alone, but by the cumulative impact of industrial activity. They may have managed and perhaps eventually overstretched their local resources, their soil fertility, their freshwater sources. We are grappling with planetary-scale resource depletion, from deforestation to collapsing fisheries to dwindling freshwater reserves. Their civilization, for all its celestial wisdom and architectural genius, appears to have reached a point where its way of life was no longer in sync with the living systems that supported it. We are rapidly approaching a similar threshold on a global scale. The warning embedded in their disappearance is clear: no civilization, regardless of its technological sophistication or peaceful nature, is immune to natural limits. Intelligence and innovation can build wonders, but they cannot indefinitely suspend the laws of ecology. A society can master the movement of stars and the cutting of granite, yet still founder if it loses its fundamental connection to the soil, the water, and the climate that feeds it. This is not a prophecy of doom, but a call for a radical shift in perspective. Their apparent peacefulness offers a crucial, hopeful counterpoint. It demonstrates that high technical achievement and deep social harmony are not mutually exclusive. They can be the twin pillars of a sustainable society. They invested their greatest efforts not in weapons of control, but in tools of understanding, aligning their communities with cosmic and earthly rhythms. This suggests a model for sustainable development that is integrative rather than extractive, one that sees human advancement as a process of deepening connection, not widening domination. For us, this means redefining progress itself. It asks whether our current path, marked by stark inequality and environmental stress, is the only or the best way forward. Could we channel our own immense technological prowess toward restoring ecological balance and fostering genuine social cohesion? Could we build economies that regenerate rather than deplete, and social systems that elevate collective well-being as the highest metric of success? Their story, in its eerie silence, provides a case study. It shows that the ultimate test of a civilization may not be the monuments it leaves behind, but the legacy of balance it maintains with the world that hosts it. Their end, whether a sudden catastrophe or a graceful dispersal, serves as a powerful reminder that survival is not guaranteed by complexity alone. It is earned through humility, adaptability, and a relentless commitment to living within the means of our one and only planet. The lesson for us is not to try and copy their lost blueprint, but to internalize its core principle, that true resilience is found not in conquering nature, but in remembering that we are an inseparable part of it. Their vanished world stands as both a caution and an invitation, urging us to write a different ending to our own chapter. A coherent story now emerges from the silent stones and scattered myths. Let us weave the threads into a single, plausible tapestry of what might have been. In the millennia following the last great ice age, as the glaciers retreated and vast new lands became habitable, humanity experienced a profound awakening. Across several continents, perhaps connected by now submerged coastlines and a shared sense of wonder, a culture coalesced around a unifying world view. Their guiding principle was harmony, a deep conviction that human society should mirror the orderly cycles of the cosmos and the nurturing abundance of the living earth. This was not a centralized empire with a single emperor, but a widespread network of communities bound by a common spiritual and scientific understanding. They were the first true astronomers, the first master geometers, and the first ecologists. Their technology was one of attunement, not extraction. They learned to read the subtle energies of the planet, building their sacred sites along these telluric pathways, and they mapped the slow procession of the stars into their architectural blueprints. Their society flourished because it solved the fundamental equation of civilization without resorting to domination. They developed perennial agricultural systems that worked with local ecosystems, creating such reliable abundance that the brutal competition for resources, the engine of so much future conflict, never took root. Their governance likely flowed from wisdom keepers, astronomer priests who derived authority from their service to celestial order and communal well-being, not from military force. This is why their art shows no conquest and their cities have no walls. They were building a permanent conversation with eternity, not fortresses against each other. For thousands of years, this delicate, advanced experiment in human coexistence thrived. Then the sky changed. Around 12,800 years ago, the stability they depended upon shattered. Whether from a comet's fragments scorching the atmosphere or a rapid climatic reversal, the planet underwent a violent transformation. Global temperatures plummeted back into a deep freeze. Continent-spanning wildfires raged, Colossal floods scoured landscapes as ice dams broke. A veil of dust blocked the sun, triggering a volcanic winter that lasted generations. For a civilization woven into the very fabric of specific ecological and celestial rhythms, this was not just a disaster, it was a profound cosmological rupture. Their world, both physically and spiritually, was coming apart. The response was not war, but a managed, heartbreaking diaspora. As their coastal heartlands vanished beneath rising seas and their inland fields failed, the people made a solemn choice. They gathered their most vital knowledge, the stories of the stars, the seeds of their crops, and the principles of their geometry, and they dispersed. In family groups and tribal bands, they traveled inland and across oceans, carrying fragments of the old wisdom like precious, broken heirlooms. These survivors became the seeds of the ancient cultures we recognize. Some groups, reaching the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia or the Nile, eventually rebuilt city-states, but the old holistic worldview fragmented. The knowledge of stone fitting became the labor of slaves for pharaohs. The celestial alignments became tools for priestly control. The memory of the flood and the lost golden age was preserved, but as myth, not as history. The great central hubs of their civilization, likely positioned on now submerged continental shelves, were swallowed by the rising oceans, preserved in cold, dark silence. Only their most durable inland outposts and high-altitude monuments, like the Sphinx or Göbekli Tepe, endured above the waves, worn but legible testaments to a forgotten zenith. This narrative does not claim to be proven fact, but it is a story that respects the evidence. It explains the precise stonework, the absence of war, the global flood myths, and the advanced astronomy as parts of a single, lost chapter. It turns their disappearance from a mystery into a tragedy of cosmic scale, and their legacy from a collection of puzzles into the foundational seeding of human history itself. We are not searching for aliens or magic, we are searching for our own lost ancestors, a chapter of human ambition that chose a different path, one whose quiet end whispers a poignant question to our loud and frantic age. Their story, for all its emerging coherence, remains stubbornly incomplete. We are left staring into the silence, holding fragments of a magnificent vase whose original shape we can only guess. Unlike Troy, where the charred layers of conflict were laid bare, or Masada, where the poignant evidence of a final stand was preserved in the dry desert air, this civilization offers no single dramatic crime scene. There is no layer of ash from a sacked city, no mass cache of weapons left in a final rallying point, no grand inscription detailing their own tragic end. This absence of a smoking gun is the mystery's most defining and most frustrating feature. If they were truly so advanced, possessing knowledge that still astounds us, why did they not leave behind a clearer record? Why not carve their history, their sciences, into more durable mediums or create a system of writing that could survive the ages? It is a question that cuts to the heart of our assumptions about what constitutes a legacy. Perhaps for them, the knowledge was not meant to be stored in libraries, but lived in practice. Their greatest records were not inscriptions, but the aligned stones themselves, the engineered landscapes, the oral traditions passed through generations, methods profoundly vulnerable to the erasure of time and catastrophe. When the teachers died and the songs were forgotten, only the silent, bewildering monuments remained, like a sophisticated machine whose instruction manual has been lost. The very completeness of their vanishing act is its own kind of evidence. It points away from a single, dramatic war, which typically leaves clear winners and losers, and toward a more pervasive, systemic failure. A society can be dismantled by 1,000 subtle pressures, a shifting climate that slowly strangles agriculture, a creeping cultural forgetfulness, a gradual dispersal of its population, none of which leave a dramatic archaeological signature. It is the difference between a building collapsing in a sudden explosion and one being slowly taken apart by the wind and rain, stone by stone, until only the foundation remains. This forces us to confront the limits of our own understanding, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing. In our modern age, driven by data and definitive answers, this unresolved mystery is a vital corrective. It celebrates the unknown not as a void to be filled with wild speculation, but as a sacred space for rigorous, humble inquiry. The role of skepticism here is not to shut down wonder, but to act as a necessary filter, separating the tantalizing possibilities from the verifiable facts. It reminds us that extraordinary claims, like a global prehistoric civilization, require extraordinary evidence we are still gathering piece by piece with LiDAR, sonar, and isotopic analysis. The scientific method is our guide through this fog, testing each hypothesis against the hard rock of geology and the immutable laws of physics. Yet, alongside this disciplined skepticism, there must be room for open-minded curiosity. The unanswered questions are not failures of archaeology, they are its engine. They are invitations to look deeper, to question established timelines, to consider new connections between disparate sites and myths. They call for interdisciplinary courage, where astronomers speak with geologists and geneticists confer with linguists, all united by a single, humbling realization. The story of humanity is far longer and more complex than our textbooks have yet dared to admit. This enduring mystery, therefore, is the true legacy of the silent builders. It is not a puzzle to be solved and filed away, but a perpetual conversation with the past. It teaches us humility in the face of deep time, reminding us that our current civilization is but a brief chapter in a much longer saga. It challenges our arrogance, suggesting that peaks of human achievement can be lost and that progress is not a straight, inevitable line. And most importantly, it keeps the flame of wonder alive. The search itself, with its blend of high-tech tools and ancient intuition, is a testament to the unquenchable human desire to know where we came from, and in understanding that, to better see who we are and who we might yet become. Their silent stones ask us to redefine what it means to succeed. We have traveled across a landscape of forgotten genius, from celestial calendars in limestone to cities without walls, following a trail that leads not to a battlefield, but to a profound and puzzling quiet. This journey reveals a history not written by the victors of war, but perhaps by the stewards of a forgotten peace. Their legacy is a puzzle that refuses to fit into our familiar narratives of rise and fall, forcing a humbling and essential shift in perspective. The evidence points away from the drumbeat of conquest that fills so much of our past and toward a different rhythm altogether, one of observation, integration, and a deep reverence for the natural order. They measured their advancement not in territory subdued, but in harmony achieved, building their society in alignment with the stars and the earth itself. Their mysterious end, whether a sudden cosmic accident or a slow environmental farewell, stands as a monumental lesson in planetary fragility. It whispers that no civilization, regardless of its wisdom or technical prowess, is immune to the forces of a changing world. This is not a story from a distant, irrelevant past. It is a mirror held up to our present moment. We live in an age of breathtaking technology and interconnected wonder, yet we face our own converging crises of climate, resource depletion, and social division. The silent builders challenge us to ask ourselves with unflinching honesty what the true markers of our own progress will be. Will we be remembered for the height of our towers, or for the health of the soil and the stability of our climate? Will our legacy be one of extraction or one of regeneration? Their vanished world does not offer a blueprint to copy, but a perspective to adopt. It proves that human beings are capable of organizing complex societies around principles of cooperation and cosmic curiosity. It suggests that our greatest security may not come from higher walls, but from a deeper understanding of the delicate systems that sustain all life. Let this enduring mystery be a catalyst not for despair, but for inspired curiosity and renewed responsibility. Let it encourage us to look at our own world with the same awe they held for the heavens, to value wisdom over mere cleverness, and to build a future that listens to the quiet warnings etched in stone and myth. If this exploration has reshaped your view of the human story, share which idea resonated most with you in the comments below. Your perspective adds another voice to this ancient conversation. And if you're ready to uncover more of history's greatest enigmas, subscribe to join the journey. The past still has so much to teach us if we are willing to listen.